Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cloud Currents podcast, where we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of cloud computing and its impact on modern businesses. I'm your host, Matt Pacheco, the head of content marketing at TierPoint. Today, we're thrilled to have with us Wesley Niels joining us. Wesley is the director of Cloud EMEA and partner at Dept, a digital agency. With over 2 decades of experience in IT and cloud technologies, Wesley has navigated the evolution of the industry with traditional data centers to modern cloud environments. His journey from help desk support to cloud leadership offers a unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities in this rapidly changing world of cloud computing, always changing. Today, we'll dive into Wesley's experiences with cloud migration, managing cloud operations, and the art of translating complex technical concepts for diverse audiences. We'll also explore the future of cloud technologies and how digital agencies like Dept are leveraging the cloud to drive innovation with their clients. So Wesley, we want to welcome you to Cloud Currents. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt. Thank you very much. Really looking forward to this podcast.
Awesome. So we can jump right into it. Can you walk us through your cloud journey to becoming a cloud leader? Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about your
sure.
experience.
Yeah, I think you briefly touched it. So when I started my career, I actually started from the bottom. Well, it's a little bit, a broad thing to say, but it's more like, I started as a help desk engineer, and then moved into a role where I went to more in terms of a consultant role, a sysadmin role, going actually to clients back in those days where there was still physical servers on location. Really going and patching switches and firewalls, etc. And then obviously, moving more into the world of cloud. I stepped there in as a cloud architect. Started first as an engineer, but cloud engineer, but then moving more into a cloud architect role because I think sort of the red line within my career is more into sales and leadership, maybe even. But that's where I went as a cloud architect. And I think like 7 years ago, I started to think about, being so long in the IT industry, do I really want to, keep there, doing the same thing all over again? And decided to move actually to a digital agency. And Dept was coming by. I wanted to jump on the train and starting and kickstarting a little bit in my career again. And I started there. There was nothing in regards to cloud. There was still everything was in data centers, and I started building up my own teams there, moving everything away from on-premise environments to the cloud. We can talk a little bit later about that topic. And then jumped as a head of DevOps to a director role, and this director role fits me best because it is not per se heavy techie, to be honest, but it does help the organization with driving the craft cloud in our organization, and managing our most important partnerships with the biggest cloud providers out there, but also developing new propositions. So understanding what the client's needs are, helping to drive their digital transformation when it comes to cloud, and supporting and being in a supporting director role within our organization as a whole to other directors as well.
Awesome. How has your experience in some of those different IT roles throughout your career shaped your approach to cloud strategy and management?
Good question. So I think with the background that I have in terms of understanding really where the IT is coming from, having physical servers inside a building or in a data center, and really understanding the concept of the cloud itself, I was able to really understand and how to design these new cloud environments these new environments on the cloud. So that helped with the background that I had to actually move forward and understanding what the cloud is actually meant for. Obviously, running applications, integration layers, putting databases in there, but also understanding how to optimize these cloud environments and how you should design that. And I'm making use of the knowledge of my skilled engineers as well here. But that helped really to move from being on premise to the data center to going to a cloud environment.
That's great. And on that topic of going to a cloud environment, so you yourself and in your organization have moved to the cloud. You've migrated to the cloud. From what I understand, you also help clients of yours move to the cloud as well.
Yeah, that's correct. So
Okay.
in multiple cases or different cases, we have clients that are still on premise and really want to move their application to a cloud environment. Um, in some cases, they already have a cloud environment and they still have some legacy over there, and we just need to move it to their cloud environment. That is something that we can help with. But on the other side, we also do greenfield implementations where a client says, right, okay, well, we have an application here in the cloud, but we want to move it away, but we don't know how. And, we also don't want to be concerned about it. So please take it over. And then we start with a greenfield implementation, one of the biggest cloud providers, and move their applications seamlessly.
So you help customers migrate to the cloud as well. Can you give us an overview as well about Dept and what else you offer to customers?
Yeah. So that's, do you have a minute? It's
We do.
it's if you go to our website, for example, it can be confusing, to be honest, and sorry for our marketing department here, but we offer a broad way of services. So I always sort of describe it from, we either build a TV commercial for clients and building cloud platforms and everything in between there. And that's a lot, I understand. But what we actually try to do here is making sure that if a client comes to us when it's a digital agent, a digital marketing client, for example, we can also offer them to build their application themselves. So we have in-house development, we have QA engineering, we have cloud engineers, and we can build that entire platform for our clients. But there's also a really, non-techie side of our company, even though it's always sort of a digital thing, but it's a non-techie side. And in some cases, clients, especially when it's bigger brands, they also want to see what we're capable of providing these kind of services as well. And that brings the perfect one-stop shop, is how we call it, to our clients. And again, it's not per se that all of our projects that we do are, need to touch everything within our company. But, coming back to your question, we can either deliver a complete brand and identity for our clients to a cloud platform or a custom built application, which runs a website or a mobile app or a e-commerce platform.
That's awesome. It sounds like a really interesting, integrated, end-to-end type of business. It sounds very valuable. So back to the cloud migration piece. So a little background of why I asked this question. We ran, to your point, we recently ran a survey of 400 IT decision makers, and amongst their biggest priorities for IT modernization coming up in 2024 and leading up into 2025 was cloud adoption, cloud migration. That was a big thing. They want to move to the cloud or move more workloads to the cloud from on-prem. In your experience with cloud migration and customers and clients wanting to do these things, and you yourself also wanting to do these things, what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced when migrating clients to the cloud?
Yeah. So a good question in terms of really understanding the technical difficulties, because where we were used to actually building stuff in a data center or on a virtualization layer like VMware or whatsoever, it was always built on virtual machines, right? By almost by default, like 99%. And that was the old school server. You have a server in here, you install your application here or your SQL database. And then suddenly you had the cloud in here. And it was easy to just move your server, or easy. It was sort of, replicating the work that you did on VMware, do it in the cloud. However, the cloud was actually more meant, and I'm not talking about the beginning, but especially in the last 4 or 5 years, was more meant to, you know, run cloud native components where you migrate your application to an abstraction layer where there is no virtual machine or no OS involved anymore. And that is a difficult part, because it's not just, you know, grabbing your application and just putting it on the cloud and it works. It's not like that. As well as integrating to external systems, for example. Those kind of difficulties, where you cannot just use one discipline like only a cloud engineer. You also need a developer that actually developed that application to make sure that that application runs properly on that web app or a function app or a Lambda or whatsoever. And those kind of migrations were the most complicated ones that we've encountered. But it is, in my opinion, still the right way forward, instead of just, grabbing your server and putting it in the cloud. That doesn't make any sense in terms of costs, but also, it doesn't help you with driving forward with making a scalable solution, a more lean and mean setup, etc. So that is I think the biggest difficulty. And the second one, briefly touched it already, the integrations with third parties, where you suddenly have an endpoint or a source or that or destination that is in a different area. And especially with the cloud, where they want to make things scalable, where you have so much different IP addresses and subnets, that is sometimes challenging to ask a IT party of a vendor, like, hey, can you maybe IP allow list these 3 IPs or these 7 IPs? And that brings a lot of questions. And that was always the hardest part in terms of communication with these kind of parties.
Those are great examples of challenges. What are some ways you overcame some of those challenges for customers?
Yeah, the best part, or again, so talking about the application, migrating into the cloud, what is really needed is understanding, how the application is built and what you eventually want to achieve by running it in a cloud native resource. It's not something, that can only be done by a cloud engineer, as I already mentioned, but you need to make sure that these disciplines work together. Right. So where, you all in the old world, you had an engineer and a developer. Now these days, DevOps is a sort of a practice that helps you with, achieving that. But there's still boundaries there. Right. So I think the best part is putting those people together, sitting next to each other. Well, virtually, maybe physically. It's kind of hard these days. But having really let them work together, and making sure that the app is distributed from where it's running on a virtual machine, to converting it to run on a cloud native service. So that's I think the biggest stake here. And for for working with third parties and doing these IP allow listing or giving access, etc., communication is always key. Don't be negative in terms of I'm in the cloud, you guys are not, and this is just how it works. Think with a solution, communicate properly with these parties, and at the end, just emailing and back and forth doesn't help. So my big stake is here as well. Just organize a meeting with your engineers, with their engineers, setting it up and making sure that that we're good to go, and everybody's on the same page. And eventually, what you want to achieve is the end result for your client, and in most of the case that it's both of your clients. So communication again is key.
Communication is key. So you talked about communication is kind of that theme there. You also talked about DevOps a little and DevOps teams. How has your adoption of DevOps practices transformed your approach to cloud operations?
Yeah. Um, I think DevOps is a difficult word, to be honest, because everybody interprets it a little bit differently. Again, it's a methodology, right? It's not per se a way of work. It's not a person. It's not a role. However, to make it a little bit more clear within our organization, is how we embraced it. Is that the DevOps way of work, in our opinion, is um, a collaboration between different roles within a team, right? That's actually what we think what DevOps incorporates. But that's a little bit vague again, and where we still are sort of a company that loves like keeping on these traditional roles, being a developer or being a QA engineer or being an SRE engineer. We also decided to actually introduce a DevOps engineer, and that engineer is actually a person, or in this case a role, where they are the bridge between the developer and a cloud engineer. So they're actually a cloud engineer, but they have development capabilities. They understand how developer thinks. That helps with understanding how you've built your application, how it needs to be built, what kind of pipelines need to be set up, and the deployment strategy to a environment. And that is a little bit of how we see and how we work with DevOps. And again, there will be a lot of people who will say like, that's not how it works and you need to do it differently. But it works for our organization. It's clear. And we also eventually, we started only with DevOps and not having SRE. We did do a split where we, started to build up an SRE team, a site reliability engineering team, which is mainly focusing on the operations side of the business. And in that way, our DevOps engineer was able to concentrate only in the implementation and working together with the project teams. Whereas the SRE engineer was really focusing on, operations and, keeping things online, making things more stable, etc., etc.
That's really interesting. All the different groups, and then the fact that you have someone who's cloud with development skills. That's very interesting, and I'm glad it works for you. So understanding your team, what strategies do you use to kind of build and manage those various teams under you between the SREs, the DevOps team, the cloud
Yeah.
engineers, everyone? How do you maintain all of that and build that team?
Yeah, and they're all in different countries, so it's sometimes quite hard to
Yeah.
manage. No. Eventually, all these engineers speak the same language, right? They are from different countries. They have different cultural backgrounds. Um, they have different educations even, but they eventually all speak the same language in terms of engineering. So they really like to see a new technology when Microsoft Azure has developed something new, or AWS. And how we do this is that we, at least every week, we have two stand-ups with our own cloud teams, as I can say it like that. So they have own stand-ups in their project teams or with their own teams on the operations side. But we also do two catch-ups every week, just to make sure that everybody understands where they're busy with, and also sharing their thoughts, sharing their knowledge. Like, hey, I'm working on this project, and keep in mind my project is going live very, very soon. So as a be prepared that this project is coming to your end. So that's one of the things that we at least use as a sort of a framework where everybody understands what everybody's busy with. And the second part is that we do a lot of knowledge sharing sessions where, as we have a new implementation done on a client, or there's a new product on what I already mentioned, like on AWS. So that is something that just comes out of the engineers itself. But thirdly, and most important, that's started last year, is that we started with the Cloud Specialist Program. And we developed this program not per se on the biggest cloud providers like AWS, Azure, GCP, but the cloud providers, the cloud services that we use around these cloud providers. For example, Cloudflare or Trend Microservices or Datadog or Terraform. What we did is we asked all the engineers, what is what is your specialty? Do you want to be specialized in becoming a monitoring specialist with Datadog? And they were able to subscribe on all of these and give their 1, 2, 3s, and then we as leads, we were checking, okay, we think that this engineer fits best with this program and this program. And this program incorporates a couple of phases where we started as a sort of a fundamental phase where they first had to understand the basics, getting in contact with the product teams of the vendors itself, making sure that they do a small exposure to inside the company, but also outside of the company. And with all these phases, we try to help them and guiding them to become a specialist in that product. The reason why we did this is that you can ask an engineer to just go ahead and learn or study for an exam, a Azure or AWS exam, which is really great, and we also pay for those exams and give them time, but really guiding them and giving them like guidance on that journey to become a specialist, we think that is a better approach than just providing them with the materials and with the funding, but rather prefer them to prepare them well and become a specialist in the end. And that's something that helps us growing as a company within these services, but also for themselves to grow as an engineer.
I love that. That's really cool how you grow, like you said, grow their own skills, but also grow so they can help your company, help your clients, and that's a really interesting approach to building those teams for the future as well. So thanks for sharing on that. And I was going to ask you how you stay up to date, but I think you covered it, because cloud is constantly changing. The platforms are constantly adding new things. Like there's new AI features constantly being provided by the cloud providers, and that looks like the way of the future. So it's really interesting how you guys share and promote focusing on specific things they're interested in.
Really and again, it's also for themselves, right? And techies, but and don't want to sort of say that this is for all techies, but in the majority, you see that they're struggling with finding a way to make steps and enhance their skills to make next steps in their career. And I think as a company and as leaders, we are responsible for making your engineers better, instead of just saying like, okay, here's your budget, here's your free time, just go ahead and do what you want. And that's, in my opinion, not the way forward.
Yeah, I agree. Plus, the world is changing so much. Eventually, you're going to have to learn some of these new skills. Some of the things we were doing a few years ago aren't.
Yeah. No, it's going really fast, and again, this, it's also really important that you get support from these partners as well, right? Because getting connection with product teams is really helpful. Getting funding for exams is really helpful. Going to events is really helpful. But these partners also need to help with that.
Very interesting. So we're going to switch gears to talk a little bit about cloud costs and optimization, because so in the survey I mentioned earlier, we also found that one of the biggest challenges to IT modernization was budgeting cloud costs. We know it's a big thing on everyone's mind year after year, and it's not going anywhere, is my guess. What are some key strategies you employ for optimizing cloud costs, especially for projects at your company?
Yeah. I think this is a really big topic, especially for digital agency. We work with clients that not per se don't have a big budget, but it's more like we they don't want to spend any of their marketing budget on cloud or things that they don't see, right? So for example, if we need to build a new website and 10% of their budget goes to cloud and building a cloud environment and running costs, etc., that is a lot. So we always have to be really yeah, how do you say it, adventurous. We need to sort of invent, the best things, because it still needs to be scalable, it still needs to be reliable, and it needs to be secure. So how can you co-op with that? It is really important that you understand their business needs and translate that back into what you're building in the cloud. You can build a Ferrari, but if they don't have the budget for a Ferrari, then don't build it. But make sure that you make at least something that is robust as something like that, right? And also give them an understanding of how important it is to build a proper foundation in the cloud for their application. And sometimes they understand, like, oh wait, okay, so if I don't make a redundant setup, then that means that my availability goes from 99.99% to 99.95%. Those kind of triggers helps them sometimes to make a different decision. That's not per se an optimization, but it gives at least some clarity for that client to understand where their money goes to. If we look at the optimization part in terms of really building the environments, what we always do is build a serverless architecture. So we try to minimize the amount of components within a cloud architecture and making sure that there are really lean setups, like not like over committed. We always look at the load. We do load tests before we make sure that they're sized so much down that the costs are as low as possible, but it still runs the application properly. And that is really important, to constantly look at how does your environment performs versus the costs. And I think if you look at the majority of our projects, they're not per se the most expensive ones, um, uh, comparing to what we sometimes inherit from other parties. So I think there's our because we don't have a lot, we don't get a lot of budget with in the majority of our projects. That also makes, we also need to make sure that we're that we build the stuff as lean as possible, but also as good as possible.
Yeah, I think lots of companies are often concerned that cost efficiency balanced with performance and the ability to scale, you want to find that balance, and it's a huge concern that if you're saving money or cutting costs too much, you're sacrificing performance or something like that. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I know that's top of mind with the cloud cost conversation. We've had this multiple times with multiple guests, and this always comes up, that balance. How do you balance cost and performance? So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing, because especially, and as well, sorry, as well with sustainability. You have companies that say, like, we want a sustainable setup, okay, but you also wanted to have it high performant, right? What is more important for the business, and these kind of, and you need to find a sweet spot there. There's no source of truth. There's no truth in there. There's always, going or a little bit for left, a little bit for right, and eventually you have to meet a little bit in the middle there. But again, I think if you really take care of the base of your architecture, as well as maintaining it afterwards, making sure that if a database is being deployed, and clean it up, or make sure that there's automation in place where it gets cleaned up, or having automation rules in your cloud environment that automatically scans and gives you a notification like, hey, this hasn't been touched forever. maybe you should clean it up. These kind of tools are out there, and you should leverage from it.
Excellent. So, so throughout our conversation, and listeners probably picked up on it. You have this great skill of translating these complex concepts and making them easier to understand, especially for non-technical stakeholders potentially too within your company, and for customers. You're probably talking to a lot of different people in the
Yeah.
process. Um, how do you? What's your approach to doing like how do you? What's your approach to translating complex cloud concepts for people who are not technical?
Yeah, I think it comes also from my background as a help desk engineer, where you really had to listen and understand what somebody on the other side of the phone back in those days, because they just called up, my mouse doesn't work, or my account is locked or whatsoever. And you really had to focus on listening what they actually wanted. So that's what I learned throughout the years, as well as designing new architectures or having a sales pitch or whatsoever. Listening to the client and then trying to translate that back into what you want to say from a technical side, but then translating back in their language, because otherwise they will get lost and they don't understand what you actually mean. And my what I've learned as well in the company that I'm working with right now at Dept, is what really helps is doing like a sort of an elevator pitch. And the key here is a slide deck. And again, for techies, that's probably, they will say like, there's a marketing or the sales pitch again. But especially for non-technical stakeholders, a picture speaks more than 1,000 words, right? So if you put like proper things in the slide deck, explaining it really well there, making comparisons, we do this internally as well to our board, where I'm sort of attached to our internal IT organization as a consultant, and work really close with our global head of IT. And when we have to propose something like replacing our network infrastructure, or want to embrace a new tool within our organization on in the internal organization, we always create slide decks. And these people don't care about the technical fuss around what we're trying to say here, but making a proper slide deck, comparison sheets, tables, some pictures, and that really helps with putting them or getting them on the other side, instead of being a sort of keeping a wall between the non-technical and the technical part of the business. And we see that sometimes IT directors or global head of IT is struggling with making that bridge. And I think some cases I also say to them, like, just involve me, and I can try to help and make it more understandable for your board, and helping to upsell this to your internal into your internal stakeholders. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably also have to communicate the value of cloud investments too, like to certain
100%.
groups, like talking to an IT leader, talking to a CFO, talking, like you said, talking to the board, different approaches. It's really interesting.
Yeah. The financial business case is always a thing, right?
Mhm.
So what is the value that you give back for adding 3 extra cloud environments inside this architecture? And that's something that you have to translate back into something visual to your non-technical stakeholders, and that works.
Really cool approach, and I'm sure it's much appreciated by your clients, and just simplifying things goes a long way, and it speeds up the process and makes sure people aren't confused at late
Yeah.
stages in the process, where it's like, oh man, I wish they knew what this was after I've been talking about it for a
No,
week. Um,
exactly. And I always picture myself of a office building where the IT was always like in the basement, right? And the rest of the company, or at least like the board and the non-technical stakeholders are always on the top of the building, and you have to meet somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really important, that you as a company transform more into a company where there are no floors anymore, but working together. There is no per se IT only or business only. Business and IT should collaborate way more than they do right now, and that helps with understanding, giving them understanding with the examples that I just gave, like making it visible for these stakeholders and for the business itself as well.
And I'm sure working with a global cloud operation with people located in a bunch of different places adds some complexity. What are some unique challenges when managing cloud operations across EMEA in your region? What are some of the challenges you face when managing those teams and
Again,
operations?
the physical part is obviously always a thing,
Yeah.
but as I mentioned, we try to um, to actually make sure that we standardize everything as much as possible, right? Because if you standardize a lot of things, everybody understands how it works. When we started with this whole journey, we had different teams, we had engineers in the beginning in different countries working on having a different way of working, and that doesn't help with collaborating. So first of all, what we did, like bringing all the engineers together, having sit them together, do a Miro board, and with yellow stickies on there, and what do you think is best, and then eventually, and that's really hard sometimes for engineers, meet in the middle, because one of the things that I also don't believe in is, or maybe where I believe in is multi-cloud engineers. My engineers are trained on GCP, AWS, and Azure. And you have a lot of engineers, they say like, oh yeah, I'm really into AWS. I don't like Microsoft Azure, for example. But why not? It's just a cloud environment. You need to make it abstract. And I know, you love Ferrari or Lamborghini. I understand that, but this is a cloud environment. It's not a car, right? So maybe they treat it like that. But yeah, I think it's really controversial. Like, who cares if your client really wants to go on Azure? Just move forward and do it. And obviously they have their preference. In my teams, they have preference on Azure, they have preference on AWS, and we try to put them on projects where the preference is. But if that's not possible because they're booked or whatsoever, they should also be able to deploy environments on Azure. And then coming back to that whole cloud operations and working together, making standardized solutions, putting things in Terraform, like standardizing these templates, making sure that we're all agree on using this technology, making sure that we use Cloudflare as a CDN, or and et cetera, et cetera. So if you agree on that and work together, what I already said before, they speak the same language, and then they come together as a group, and then they will be strong, and they will do knowledge sharing, and they will collaborate way better than just putting them in silos and let them do the thing.
So, how do you navigate differences in regulations across different countries? So you're working cloud operations is one thing, but how do you manage the different laws? And it's constantly changing. Like there's data privacy laws in certain countries. There's sustainability law. It's all changing constantly, and Europe is often at the
Yeah,
forefront of some of that regulation. How do you manage that?
yeah, yeah. That's a difficult topic, to be honest. And I want to be clear. We do have engineers throughout the entire world. So they're in Australia, they're in the US, they're in Argentina and EMEA, etc. So it's a constant conversation that you need to have internally to make sure that if a client, especially with government clients, that it's really hard for them or for us, that we make sure that they are not able to reach those environments, right? Just to make sure there's no possibility for data leakage, for example. And it's a constant conversation going on. But the majority of our clients they're not on the forefront of, having their environment so protected as a government or a military environment where these engineers are not able to go to these environments. So we try to to look at client per case, and if it's really needed, then we make sure that this engineer or this person is not able to get to these environments, to make sure that indeed there is no possibility for data leakage or for privacy or whatsoever.
Great. Really interesting. As we wrap up, I'm going to ask you some future forward-thinking questions. Let's start with what is the most exciting cloud technology or trend that you see coming in the next 5 to 10 years that really gets you energized and excited?
I'm not going to say AI. Sorry. I'm a little bit tired of AI. No, that's a joke. I think AI is a great tool, and we all should leverage from it to make sure that we, enhance things, make things better, etc. However, if I purely look at cloud itself, I think cloud component-based computing is something that that will make a next step. And what I mean with that is the abstraction layer is what I talked already before, where we went from virtual machines to going to a cloud native service. I think eventually it will go a level up and that is SaaS, so that's software as a service. But leveraging more from different SaaS services and building one environment. And I think, for example, the Mac Alliance, that's microservices, API, composable, and headless, they embrace that whole idea of making an abstraction layer of, putting products next to each other instead of building actually things in the cloud. And not saying that per se this is the new thing, because it's already there for a couple of years. But it is something that I do see as a trend and moving forward more often. But there's also a danger in there. And that's also something that there's a different side and danger in there, because it's all SaaS. And SaaS is not per se the biggest, it's not per se the most scalable solution out there. You do incorporate a sort of a vendor lock-in. They are able to say to you, like, hey, you've used our cloud services and now you suddenly have to pay twice as much for it. And that's not with all SaaS providers, but that is a danger. They are able to, to just say that to you. And you can say that with the public cloud providers as well. However, if you make sure that your application or your solution that you have deployed on the cloud environment is cloud agnostic, then it's way easier to just move out, instead of having a tool where you run your front-end web application, where it's really hard to move that to a different SaaS provider or even back to the cloud, to a public cloud. But that being said, I do think that is sort of, the next step in the world of cloud and making that abstraction layer differently than it is right now. Another thing that I before I went into this podcast, what I was thinking about is also cloud exit. I'm not sure if that was already discussed in your podcast before, but you do see a sort of or they think there's a trend going on. You see a lot of LinkedIn posts about cloud exit. Yes, Basecamp and maybe Netflix and Dropbox left the cloud, but these are so big examples of companies that have a lot of data in the cloud. And yeah, if you do the math, then probably moving back to a data center is way cheaper. I don't believe in in that it is actually going to happen anytime soon, and especially not with the majority of companies in there. But yeah, it could be that that if you're a really big company, you have a lot of data in there, it makes more sense to do a cloud exit. But it also comes down with training your engineers again. Where do you find these engineers? You can go to a private cloud, and it's outsourced as well. But if you want to do everything back in your own data centers, you know, this craft and installing a switch in a storage area network or a firewall, it's not regularly out there anymore. There are not a lot of no, I think not even universities that cooperate with understanding how a firewall or physical server works anymore. So I think that's also, a dangerous step to actually move out of the cloud and go into to a data center.
Yeah, we often hear about repatriation and the fact that for one, not like you said, not all companies can do that. Netflix and big companies like that, they essentially created their own cloud platform, like they're doing it themselves instead of
Yeah,
using the bigger providers. But yeah, like you said, there's cost implications of hiring and maintaining staff. There's real estate you
yeah.
need your networking power. Compute
Investment.
everything. You need investment. You need a lot of things to fully repatriate. That's why some businesses do it per workload, but it all depends on your needs and all of that. But yeah, it's a interesting concept.
It is an interesting topic, especially because on some of the events that I went this year, it is a sort of a buzz and people are talking about it. But is it actually a thing? It's more like a hype, and I see that coming by on
Mhm.
LinkedIn and maybe other social media as well. But I don't think that it eventually will actually, be a thing. But it's always nice to
Yeah.
have a conversation around it.
And then also the talent.
Apart from
Yeah.
AI, yeah, and
Yeah.
apart from AI, because that's
Yeah.
it's a topic that is going on, and maybe to really briefly touch upon it, because I don't want to go over time, but if so, then just cut
No,
it
you're
out.
good.
No, I do believe in AI when it comes to making a TV commercial, or at this point, right? Also the co-pilot function within GitHub, for example, where engineers and developers are able to code faster with using Copilot, but also products. You see that vendors now incorporate Copilots in their environments, for example, in a monitoring environment where you can ask a Copilot, "Hey, I see an alert here. What does it mean?" And then it gives you a lot of things back. But it's still sort of a supporting role. In the beginning of this year, I asked we got one of our students to do his thesis about AI engineering. And what I mean with that is that I wanted to explore him to investigate how can we automate our work as much as possible with the current AI products out there. And the outcome was actually almost zero. There are products out there that can help you with AI products that can help you with building things a little bit faster. But actually going from sprint zero to the end of the project, it was really, really hard to incorporate those AI products and making sure that it didn't take more time but actually gave you back more time. So that was the outcome of his thesis, and it was quite surprising, because everybody thinks, oh yeah, we have AI, and we have Elon Musk with his new robot and he can do everything. That will take a lot of time still to actually automate us away as an engineer to do the things that we do.
I agree. I think the human touch is still in there, especially from an IT perspective. We still have to take action. I think AI is a tool to help us gather data, to analyze data, but at the end of the day, the action has to be taken by a human. When you have AI monitoring your security threats, you still need someone to actually do something about it. We're not quite there yet, like you said. So it's going to be a little bit before I think we're going to be around helping with strategy and even from a marketing perspective. I come from the marketing world. AI is a tool to help you be better is not a thing that will replace you right now. Unless we reach general intelligence, I don't think we'll be there for a bit, but it's a great tool to help you gather information, be a little quicker. But yeah, like you said, it's not going to fully replace some of these
No,
big projects.
and I don't want to look away from it. Let me
Oh,
be
absolutely.
frankly honest,
Yeah,
because it is something that we need to constantly look out for, but use it and leverage it as a tool, not per se as a replacement for the daily job that you
exactly.
do.
And it's cool. It's cool. Like you said, with some of the video things you can do and see coming out, and with the search functionality coming out, that's
It
big.
helps.
It's big. Awesome. One final question for you before we wrap up. It's kind of a fun one. What advice would you give to IT professionals looking to transition into a cloud-based world?
Don't close your eyes for everything that is new out there. There is an old world of IT engineers and there is a new world of IT engineers. And always sort of trying to compete against each other, or saying like, the cloud, who wants to go to the cloud? Or hey, why Azure? And because AWS is so much nicer. Just open up your eyes, broaden your vision, incorporate what is out there, and always think on what eventually your internal organization wants, and as well as what your client wants, because that's the most important. If your client, has a solution and you have 10 different tools instead of three, that's way better than, than only having three, right? So always think outside of the box. Not let them not hold you back in what is out there and what you can use, but try to use the best of breed approach, and that will help you to develop as a better engineer, and making the next steps and developing also better solutions for your clients. And that's something that I've learned over the years, to not close your eyes what is out there, but embrace it, because it's going fast. And if you're not jumping on it, then you will fall off.
Great advice. Thank you for that. Wow. Yeah, that's great. Good to hear, and absolutely true. So we could probably talk for like 2 more hours
Hours.
with all the great stuff we had to talk about. We do have to wrap it up. I do appreciate you coming on, Wesley. We learned a lot, and I appreciate you taking the time talking about your journey and your expertise. So we really appreciate having you on.
Well, thank you very much, Matt, and thank everybody as well in the organization. And I hope it was something nice to listen to.
Yeah.
And again, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And for our listeners, thank you for listening in. Stay tuned for the next episode of Cloud Currents. And if you're interested in that report I mentioned earlier, we will link to it in the bio of in the description of the episode. So thanks for listening. Check out the next episode. And again, thank you, Wesley, for joining us. See y'all later. Thank you.